Children do not need to be stuck in a rut. The gut microbiome is an ecosystem of billions of bacteria in our gut. But one of their key main roles is to build these things called neurotransmitters. Things like protein are vital for building those neurotransmitters. We've seen 10,000 people through our clinic.
Lucinda, that is incredible. Hi, I'm Caroline Cary and welcome to the Eat Nourish Love Podcast. For over 20 years, I've created events, raised over 4 million for good causes, and been lucky enough to meet some incredible people along the way. This podcast is about exploring stories and insights that really shape us, with inspiring guests from wellness, business, self-care and personal growth. It's about learning to trust our intuition and discovering what truly matters, and how, with hard work, belief and tenacity, we can make so many things happen. I'm so excited to welcome Lucinda Miller onto this podcast today. It was a phone call, a cup of coffee, and the most extraordinary thing that Lucinda Miller lives just down the road from me. She has been inspirational to not only to me, but so many people. And I was lucky enough to have her coming to talk at the Eat Nourish Love Autumn Fair last year, and it was such a huge success. Lucinda's been, she's a naturopath. She's been working with functional medicine for over 30 years. She's an author of 3 books, all here. Her latest one is Brilliance. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for your book as well. And she runs NatureDoc, which is these clinics across the world, but I think it's gone global now. Is that correct, Lucinda? I think you've got one in Australia, and is it Ireland?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So we've got quite a big team dotted around the UK. But what's amazing is these practitioners then, due to life, move, and it takes them over to other countries, which is great, and being able to support people in Australia and in Ireland, which is amazing.
And you're a mother of 3, which is really interesting. And actually, what is so amazing about the whole thing that you're doing is you're bringing it to the general public, and being on a podcast like this and all the stuff that you're doing is opening up channels so people can cope better, because there is so much noise out there, I think, for everybody. And I don't think I've told you, but I was one of the case studies in the 1970s for dyslexia at Aston University. I was so traumatized at school because of the way they taught, and I couldn't read properly, and it really affected my parents. So I spent my whole life challenged with this. But I think Richard Branson calls it his superpower.
That's right. I think that dyslexia is still being understood. It's not fully understood. And I think there's a lot of crossover with other neurodivergence, which is emerging at the moment too. But, back in the 1970s, you would have had to be really struggling at school, probably at least 3 years behind academically before anything would be picked up. And it's amazing that it was by Aston University. That's fantastic. But still, I don't think many teachers really understood how to teach a dyslexic child. Whereas now it's much, much more white, mainstream, etc. But there are still a huge number of teachers that do not have that SEND training yet. And I hope that will happen over time.
So tell me your journey. How did this all begin?
How did this all begin? Well, it was really my first date with my husband, who I had known for rather a long time. So this was not a kind of odd conversation to have on your first date. But essentially, he'd just been diagnosed with something called ADHD. And when you think that kind of rings a bell, but, I hadn't got a diagnosis at that point. But then about 2 years later, having had a baby and finding life incredibly hard, juggling it all, my husband said, I think you really ought to get this explored and, thought about. So I went to see his psychiatrist and, I got the diagnosis, and a lot of my life sort of all came together, that sort of light bulb moment of why my brain was so busy and then so drained, and why there were certain aspects of my life which were absolute chaos, like my finances and my filing, and why I couldn't say no to lots of exciting new things. So very excited by shiny new things.
The shiny new things, exactly.
So anyway, so then, of course, as we all know, neurodivergence is very genetic. So we assumed that at least one of our children would have some sort of neurodivergence. We've got a lot of dyslexia in the family. There's some autism, sensory processing as well. So it's not like, we were kind of weren't quite sure what was going to happen. But anyway, it was really our eldest son who had actually done quite well in reception, and we weren't that concerned about him. But it was really year one was a real car crash for him, and he was in bits, and we were trying to work out whether it was the school, whether it was friendships, whether he was being bullied, or whether there was something else going on. And I'd always been into nutrition, and that's how I'd managed my ADHD. And so I knew there would be something in there. But I think a bit like you were talking about earlier, this noise in the background, what should you do? This is even before social media existed, but it was essentially, what areas should you go down the medication route? Should you go down the diet route? Should you go down to exercises, auditory, all these different things, and think, what do I do to help my son? So because I'm into nutrition, I did run some tests, and we found some really interesting things. We found a really out of whack gut bug that needed sorting out. He had some toxicity. When we moved house, the first thing we did was to renovate our house and the windows, and there was a lot of lead in the old paint, and he got affected by that quite a lot. So there were two big aspects to unpick, which we did, and I kid you not, within 2 days of making some changes for him on this sort of getting really focused in exactly what he needed, rather than worrying about all the supplements and things that you can learn about, but going in on exactly what he did need, he woke up and he said, "Mummy, my brain's not playing hide and seek anymore.
Wow.
I can concentrate." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "It's like my brain's in a game of hide and seek. And I've got 6 boys to find before my brain works like the other boys." And we, as I said, working on his gut health, helping his detox pathways to open up, reducing the exposure to the lead, etc. We did all these things. And amazingly, within a year or so, he really was the best version of himself. His IQ went up, his tics went away, his tummy cleared up. He started hugging us. He was making friends. He wasn't doing so badly in sport. He was just, everything was really coming together. And it was just incredibly exciting. Anyway, I used to check in with him every couple of months just to, have that conversation about the hide and seek brain. And he'd be so funny. He said, "I can see one round the corner." And then he'd go, "I found him." And then right at the end, he said, "I've got one more to go, Mummy, but so do the other boys. Can I stop now?"
Well, extraordinary that must have been. And as a mother, to see that change going in, it must have just been, I mean, how did you feel about that?
I was just blown away. And it made me so passionate to spread the word that children do not need to be stuck in a rut, that they can emerge out of the fog. He'll always have ADHD. I'll always have ADHD. My husband will always have ADHD. Our daughter got diagnosed later on with ADHD. She shows a completely different presentation. So with him, it was executive function. It was organisation, kind of getting brain on paper, so a lot to do with dyspraxia as well. Whereas with her, it's more anxiety and hyperactivity. And our third is not diagnosed with anything. But I would say he had some rigidities when he was younger, but it's much more flexible now. So, and we've unpicked a lot of this through changing the diet, getting the right supplements in, and so forth. And I will say that they don't need to be on the supplements forever. And I think that's where a lot of people think, "Oh my gosh, I'm stuck." It's a bit like taking a ADHD medication forever or a thyroid medication forever. These are things to be there as scaffolding until that child or that person doesn't need them anymore. whether, you retest and you find that their levels have got to the normal level, or just by instinct, you feel that you've run out of a pot and they haven't gone backwards when, you haven't got a new one, for instance, or whatever.
I think I just want to come back to that, because I think that's really important, because a lot of people say, I can't afford to be on these supplements, or I can't afford to have organic. But, I think in what you're putting out there with your information, and goodness me, I mean, the footnotes to everything else that's on your book is extraordinary. You must be read about the scientific paper every day, if not 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. But what I think is amazing is the fact that we can get that story out, but also there are very simple things that you're putting in place. So I'd like to just start with, because obviously we talk about all these different things, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and they're neurotransmitters, aren't they? It's the way the brain works, but there's so many more. You've got a chapter where it's got so many different sides of it. So can you just go through that and how you came to find all these different areas?
Yes, so really it comes from gut health, understanding about gut health. So the gut microbiome is an ecosystem of billions of bacteria in our gut. There are also viruses, parasites, yeast, etc. as well. But it's essentially this sort of incredible kind of universe full of microbes interacting with each other. And these microbes all play a role in lots of aspects of our health, from bringing down inflammation to helping with our immune system, to making vitamins, to help with digestion, etc. But one of their key main roles is to build these things called neurotransmitters. So I think we've all know that serotonin, a very high percentage, some say 90% of serotonin, is made in the gut. And that is made primarily from these gut microbes. Equally, so serotonin helps with things like sleep, mood, and going to the loo, so doing a poo, right? Mm-hmm. But there are many other neurotransmitters. So the key one for ADHD is something called dopamine. And dopamine helps you be motivated, excited about doing a project, or basically getting things done and being focused enough to get a project done. Now, dopamine is also made in the gut by different bacteria. Then equally, there's something called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine helps with things like working memory and processing. And acetylcholine is made in the gut from a gut bacteria, which a lot of people will have heard about, called lactobacillus. And lactobacillus is what digests dairy. It's in things like yogurt and kefir, and it makes it more digestible than, say, milk. That acetylcholine is so important, as I said, for learning overall, but also things like self-regulation and emotional regulation, which is a big aspect of where kids who are neurodivergent really struggle. So yes, underlying, they've got, say, a problem with making dopamine because they've got ADHD, but equally there are other aspects which are also brought in, such as the acetylcholine. There's also an amazing neurotransmitter that's made to help us sleep, help us keep calm, take away that anxiety, and that's called GABA, GABA. And again, that is made by lactobacillus. It's also made by its cousin bifidobacterium. So this is where, again, yogurt and kefir, you feel much calmer when you've been eating those kinds of foods. There's sauerkraut, there's kimchi, there's apple cider vinegar, there's miso soup, cucumber pickles. So there is one little aspect of McDonald's which might be healthy, and that's the pickle. But yeah, so there are different foods, and so obviously some children won't eat those foods or can't eat those foods because they've got allergies, etc. But they are really helpful at contributing to building these neurotransmitters. And most neurodivergent folk, as I sort of mentioned earlier, it is strongly genetic, and we do big deep dives into genetic profiling to look at the kids and the adults that come to see us in the clinic to get a better understanding of how they make serotonin, how they make dopamine, how they make adrenaline, acetylcholine, GABA, etc. And once you know that, then you can fill in the gaps. So there are different nutrients that help to make those. You've got the basics like protein. So there's tyrosine in things like meat and fish, etc. And that helps to make dopamine. You've got tryptophan, which is made from turkey, bananas, cashew nuts, things like that. And that helps to make the serotonin. So the protein is really, really important. But then you've got other aspects in the way, like vitamin D. If you find it very glitchy to absorb vitamin D, then you're going to find it really difficult to make serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, etc. So it's understanding exactly how you're wired. And as I said, you fill in the gaps with the supplements. It might just be for part of the year, like the winter. It may be that people choose to go and live abroad for 3 months a year in the winter because they're better in the sunshine. So you can, once you've got that knowledge, then you can make life decisions over what you do, whether you take a supplement, whether you move country, whether you eat lots of vitamin D rich foods, etc.
And it's quite interesting though, isn't it? Because actually, we're suddenly really wanting diagnosis on everything. And actually, sometimes it's sitting there and listening to ourselves and thinking, gosh, that didn't make me feel good. So try. And there's not one all size fits all, is there? Because some people say, oh, I want to go on keto diet. I want to take my gluten out. And I think I've listened to you talk about your oats and ready bread. Gosh, that was a thing of the past, wasn't it? The ready bread. But actually, it's not just one thing that fits all. And so just by saying, oh, keto will fix you, or take your gluten out, or whatever. I mean, obviously, some of those foods are allergic foods. They can cause all sorts of problems in the gut. But how does someone go about it if they don't want to go and get a diagnosis? How does someone say, actually, I'm not feeling quite right. I'm thinking these foods might cause me a problem. What do they do?
So, first of all, going into the whole food side of things, as I mentioned earlier, things like protein are vital for building those neurotransmitters. Equally, a healthy gut microbiome is also really, really important for building those neurotransmitters. So if you focus in on eating lots of healthy proteins, so that could be meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, pulses, nuts, seeds. But equally, you're also feeding the gut microbiome with the cultured foods and hopefully lots of lovely fruits and vegetables. So the polyphenols, or the pigments in fruits and vegetables, so like the purple in the blueberries or the red in the raspberries or the orange in the orange, these all also contribute to a healthy gut microbiome and can help to build those neurotransmitters. So essentially a healthy diet that it contains lots of simple ingredients. So when you go to the supermarket, you buy ingredients rather than packets of things, then you're likely to be able to feed your brain better than if you're buying packaged, convenience, highly processed foods, which probably will be high in starches, be very low in the important things that help to feed the brain, vitamins and minerals such as iron, zinc, vitamin C. All these things are really, really vital and important for the brain.
So I just wanted to thank Maggie Wellness for sponsoring this podcast. I have always been really lucky with my hair. It's always been full and healthy. I've never really needed much help. But then I was lucky enough to try some of the products from Maggie Wellness. And I cannot tell you, my hair is so much fuller, shinier, and it's growing faster than ever. If you're dealing with thinning hair, breakage, or hair loss, their shampoo, conditioner, rejuvenating serum, and supplements are designed to nourish the scalp and support healthy hair growth. What I really love too is that there are no harsh chemicals. Maggie Wellness products are 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and free from SLS, silicons, parabens, GMOs, and PEGs, and they're all in beautiful, sustainable packaging. So if you want stronger, healthy hair, why not try some of Maggie Wellness products? And you can get 20% off, excluding bundles, with the code EAT20. If you go to the bottom of this podcast, you can see the code EAT20, and there's the link.
And if you're if you have been diagnosed with something like this, and then where do you come in? So, for example, if I've been and had diagnosis and I've been told that I've got dyslexia or ADHD or whatever it is, then I can come to you, can't I, at your clinics, whatever, see one of your, either you or someone, and then you can help us with the diet and the supplements and what might work. I mean, there's a big thing, isn't there, on zinc in diet as well?
Mm-hmm. So, yes, what we do is anyone can read my blogs for free. They can go on my Instagram for free. They can buy the books for a little bit. But most people can navigate this on their own. They can go, okay, I'm going to step up my diet. I'm going to pick out a few supplements, the ones that Lucinda seems to talk about quite a lot, that seem to relate to me, that sing to me. And that's great. And they'll usually really thrive with that. The people that we see in the clinic are where there's a major problem going on. So we were talking a little bit earlier about this sort of disorder word. We see the kids that have been excluded from school, excluded from many schools, refuse to go to school, are so, their whole brain is so overtaken by what is going on in their lives that they're unable to really thrive in this world. They are often kids with significant mental health challenges, whether it's OCD, self-harm, suicidal ideation, etc. So we're seeing the really difficult cases. And that's where these things can become a disorder, because they are so heavy on that person. And the parents are all incredible. They're putting all these accommodations in, but it's still, every single day, it's like walking through treacle, because it's such hard work managing their needs. And if you can take that heaviness away and lighten things up with the diet and the supplements, etc., lifestyle things, things like getting outside, lots of fresh air, etc., can make a massive difference to them. And that's really what we try and do. So people come to the clinic, really what we're doing is, it's when there's a roadblock or people are underconfident with what they're doing. So, for instance, they're saying, I've read about zinc, I've read about iron, I've read about probiotics, but I don't know really where to start. And it could potentially, I might buy lots of supplements and then my child might not take them, or, whatever. So what we would do is we run tests. Very rarely do we run blood tests. Occasionally we do, but mainly they're urine tests, hair tests and stool tests, which people can do at home at their own pace when their child is ready to do a poo or cut their hair or whatever it might be, or do a wee, which is so much easier than having the pressure of having to do it within a clinic setting. And those tests will give us this incredible information about what is going on inside the body, the things that the child can't tell you, the parent can't spot. Because at the end of the day, most of these kids and adults look pretty well on the outside. There's kids with shiny, bright eyes, good skin, good teeth, and you're thinking, they don't, but they really aren't managing their life very well. And then you go deep into the cellular health and you find they've got all these deficiencies or inflammation or gut imbalances, and you can then work on those, and then they become so much happier and so much more balanced, more focused, just generally easier to bob along with.
You've got 3 books out. You've got The Good Stuff. I can't believe it's baby food. The pictures on the front, are those your children?
So The Good Stuff is Charlie, who's now 16, and my niece Tilly, who's about 14 or 15 now. And then the middle one, the baby food one, is 2 of our mini NatureDocs, who are now about 7 and 5. And then Brain Brilliance doesn't have photo, but it does have my son Charlie in there, who's now 16, so you can see the difference
and
if you have both of them.
What's so lovely about that is that, people thinking it's children, this is for all of us. I mean, the recipes in here are fantastic. I can't tell you how much, just loved it, and I just want to get cooking all of them. And I know my daughter-in-law's, there's a lovely little video, I think, of little Otis with his father, our son, cooking some of the recipes that you do. So they've just loved it because they were presents from a girlfriend who actually introduced us. But what have you got, 60 recipes in this one? I mean, it's a huge amount of recipes. How long did it take you to do all those recipes?
Well, they all sort of emerge. So I don't do them all at once. I tend to kind of create them in my head and then test them with my family and then write them down. So each recipe usually is done about 3 times before it gets into my blog or into a recipe book. But they're all the things that I've just loved over the years and adapted and found what our clients really like, what the kids will eat, etc. So the Brain Brilliance recipes are probably geared to slightly older children and teens, purely because that's when the neurodivergence usually emerges. Obviously, autism can be diagnosed quite young, but things like dyslexia and ADHD is often 6 plus, 6, 8, 10. And some are diagnosed when it comes to GCSE time, A-level time, or even university, or even later. So that's why the recipes are geared a little bit more to the slightly older palate, whereas the good stuff is obviously kind of more little ones. And then I can't believe baby food is obviously weaning, it's baby food and toddler food.
Now, it's so important, isn't it, really? I say it's so important. I suppose it's, it's all our opinions, really. But to start young, why is it so important to start young with children, with the babies and the children? And how, these are 2 questions, really. And how would you start? How would you advise a young mother?
So all the research that I have read over the years suggests that the first 1,000 days of a child's life is the most important in terms of setting those foundations for future health. So they help with the brain development, they help with immune system development, gut development. Essentially, those 1,000 days are important. So the 1,000 days include when you're pregnant. So it's really important to think about your health when you're pregnant, and then for the first 2 years of life. But of course, the brain is always developing, the immune system's always adjusting. So it doesn't mean that once you've got to their second birthday that's it. You can actually think, well, this is just the foundations, but I can still build on those. And even if you're coming to this podcast and your children are older, I always say it's never too late. And the human brain is still developing. For girls, it's like 21, 22 years old. And for boys, it's sort of 23, 24 years old. And if you're neurodivergent, it can have even a 5 to 7 year lag. So this is why they're often late bloomers. It's where, the chap who'd sort of slightly had his head in the sand, slightly sleepy, suddenly becomes this sort of multi-millionaire age 32. And you go, where did that come from? Because they've, done nothing, because their brain suddenly sort of matured and their prefrontal cortex is there. But essentially going back right from the start, those 1,000 days means that if you can do your best, and I think this is what we do as parents naturally, we are doing our best. It's just sometimes we can get kind of slightly distracted by, as you said, social media noise or, friends or other people influencing our choices. But actually sometimes you need to stick to your guns and do what is right for your child and what's right for you. But my sort of big mantras in terms of those first 1,000 days is to eat a nutrient-dense diet. This is when you're pregnant, when you're feeding your baby, whether it's breastfeeding, whether it's once they're weaning, but basically getting the most nutrient-dense foods in you can. And those foods tend to be outdoor-reared meats and, good free-range eggs, good quality dairy, the best fruit and veg you can get. If you can't afford organic, just wash and peel it. It's okay. And therefore, getting those nutrients in, thinking about things like if they do need antibiotics, then put in a probiotic in afterwards. If they're born in the winter, then definitely vitamin D and probably continue with vitamin D. And so keeping their immune system strong, trying to avoid as many household chemicals, plastic exposure. Those microplastics are causing quite a lot of havoc. It's emerging now. So it's keeping the environment as natural as possible. So, instead of you going to the supermarket and buying masses of different household cleaners, you use lemon and vinegar, and things like that to clean your house because it's so much better. Trying to think, do I really need to give my baby Calpol? Yes, they've got they're not quite right, but they're still quite relaxed. They're still sleeping okay. I mean, Calpol is there, paracetamol is there for a child that's very distressed, can't sleep, is in lots of pain. And I think it's very easy to just hand it out every time they kind of have a little sniffle, and that's not going to actually help their cold. But whereas vitamin C, vitamin D, elderberry would help that cold a lot more. So it's really sort of going back to nature, getting your baby outside as much as possible into the fresh air, opening your windows. The gut microbiome gets fed by the microbes in the fresh air. So that's why it's great for your mental health, getting your baby weight back, feeling great, being social is getting out with your baby with in the pram, and they've got lots of fresh air too. As I said, at home, not being it's difficult in the winter when it's all cold, but, and wet and horrible, but, try and keep those windows open, get lots of fresh air going around the house. Those sorts of things are so important. Just to think, I need every single cough, every single sniffly nose. How can I get on top of that? Don't let them go on and on and on and on, because that's just showing that the immune system is continuously fighting that and not prioritising the development of the child. So they will be bright, but they often, there can be developmental delays if they're always ill.
It's very interesting because when our youngest daughter, our youngest, Annabelle, she was misdiagnosed with a tumour in her eye. So that was 27 years ago. She's brilliant, well, unbelievable now. But I learned about the chemicals, the harmful chemicals, obviously, because, there are lots of water's chemical, but the harmful chemicals and how to remove those from your environment, because the skin is one of our biggest organs and it absorbs so much. And I think sometimes we don't realise that it can be very little, it's even like burning a candle in your room. And I learned the other day that actually it's very bad for dogs to have these scented candles burning in your rooms all the time, because it can affect their health too. So there's lots of things that we are doing, and it's not saying don't use them, is it? It's about saying, actually, what I think what your message is that there are so many things that we can do that are quite simple. They're easy to adapt and change, and don't change the ritual, just change what you're doing. And I think that's really important. I think that's what you bring forward. But also, you've got such a big heart, Lucinda. Why is this so important to you, and where do you see this going?
So every time I work with a new family, it breaks my heart that they've been struggling for so long without any support. So I think particularly our country right now, the education system's struggling, the NHS is struggling, and there are not that many answers, even if you are able to access those. And if these parents had this knowledge, then they could all be so much happier. It could be a much more joined up family. Everyone could jog along so much more easily. And it would mean a lot more flexibility. It would mean being able to go and stay with friends for the weekend, go out to a restaurant, go on holiday, without all these accommodations that you have to put in if you've got a struggling child. And we've seen 10,000 people through our clinic over the years.
That's enormous. Just repeat that. How many people?
10,000.
Lucinda, that is incredible.
And I can't promise to say everyone's been a success story for whatever reason, but a lot have. I saw a child just yesterday, and Mum has literally just followed the books. We had our first consultation yesterday, but about 6 months ago, she said, this is too much. We're walking around life as if on eggshells. Our child is incredibly dysregulated. School is really struggling with them. I've got to do something. So she got my books. She started cooking from scratch. She did a couple of basic supplements, I think magnesium, vitamin D and omega-3, I think, if I remember rightly. And this child, I saw his school report. He's happy. He's making friends. I mean, he told me how many friends he had. This child has a diagnosis of ADHD, autism, and dyslexia. And he used to really struggle. And now he's so happy at school. He was engaged with me. We were chatting. He was telling me about all his friends. He was telling me about the football he loved. And I thought, 6 months ago, you weren't able to articulate this at all, and now you can. And I just think that is what a mum's done on her own. And then we're going to try to just fill in the rest of the gaps. But she's pretty much done it.
But that's it, isn't it? Because you don't realise actually what these children are struggling with. And sometimes they don't know themselves. And actually, they don't understand why they haven't got friends or what they're doing, because they don't understand that behaviour. And that's why it's so tough for the parents and the family to see that. And I think that's incredible. I saw, I know one person who stood up in the audience at one of your talks, and she said, Lucinda has changed our family's life. She has the information, and we followed it, and she has made our lives come back. It is extraordinary. And I think to be someone who's living a legacy like that with what you're doing, and it's not difficult, is it? I mean, and I say that it's difficult in terms of to change. But some of the suggestions, I mean, one of the couple of in your book, but one or two of them is this, and I've told a lot of people about this, is putting the Epsom salts in the bath for the magnesium. And that's a brilliant one.
Epsom salts are magic in my life. They have transformed my children so dramatically over the years. So Epsom salts are magnesium salts that you put in the bath. They're flakes, they're white flakes, and they melt in the water quite quickly. And you put about 2 cups in the bath. And who doesn't love a lovely warm bath? And kids, especially neurodivergent kids, really love warm baths. They love water. So anyway, so it's not a big onerous thing to sit in a bath for 20 minutes. And during that 20 minutes, the skin, which is our biggest organ, as you mentioned earlier, absorbs that magnesium. So it goes into the muscles, so it relaxes tight muscles. A lot of people who are neurodivergent are also hypermobile. They have a lot of joint and muscle pain. Equally, it helps to make something called GABA, and GABA helps you sleep. And it helps you put you into this soporific state, so you feel much more relaxed. And my daughter, as I said, who is on the anxious side, she used to say, I always have happy dreams when I have an Epsom salt bath. And that's something that she was talking about when she was 5, 6, 7, This was so brilliant. But she's at university now. She still has a big sack of Epsom salts at university that we have to lug down there each term. It's because, she plays high-end sport, and she really, really needs that in terms of recovery on her muscles and so forth. So Epsom salts are great. They also help with the detox pathways. So if you're thinking, actually, we have used every household chemical under the sun, I use all these things on my skin, actually I need to change. Epsom salts can help the body to naturally and safely escort those toxins if they've built up in the body. So they're sort of doing a dual role. It helps with something called sulfation. So sulfation is an element of the liver that basically helps to pass out toxins out of the system.
I just know I could come to listen to every one of your talks. I could talk to you for hours, Lucinda. Honestly, we could go on. I think what you're doing is, as I said this before, the legacy that you're leaving and what you're doing with everybody. And I think you're going to do another tour. I think you're going to do some tours in some lovely countries quite soon. But honestly, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing, from everybody who's listening to this. For me, as a parent and grandparent and someone who suffered with this, to understand it even more. I want to ask you a question. Well, actually, it's the power of 3. I've always believed in the power of 3. Eat, nourish, love, inspire, deliver, and create, and bring people together. And I love that. So I'm going to ask you to think of 3 things to leave our listeners, that 3 things that probably are the most important things in your life, from your work to what you do. 3 tips you can give our listeners.
Ooh, good question. So my top 3 things would be, first of all, cook from scratch whenever you can, because this is going to provide all the wonderful nutrients that your body and brain needs. Avoid those ultra-processed foods where possible, because those will be draining you of those key nutrients. And most importantly, enjoy food, enjoy cooking, enjoy that whole food ethos at home and really encourage that so that everyone has this wonderful relationship with food going forward, and it becomes that magnet that brings everyone back together as a family later on in life.
Oh, Lucinda, that's so powerful. Honestly, it's been so amazing meeting you, and thank you so much for coming on this podcast and sharing your information. Just let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your lovely shop, your books and your website and anything else.
Oh, that's kind, Caroline. Okay, so our clinical website is naturedoc.com. The online shop, which is my hand-picked collection of the best supplements and natural eczema creams, etc., is naturedoc.shop. And then Instagram is probably the best social media handle to get in touch with, which is naturedoc.kids. But we also have online courses for both autism and ADHD. So if people want to explore this in a bit more depth and they feel that they can do it mainly on their own, but they just need a few extra tips over and above the books, then that's there. But in terms of the books, you can buy those from Waterstones, Amazon, but also worldwide as well.
And you've got a fantastic newsletter, which I love receiving. And you've already done that lovely recipe. The latest one was the curry noodle one. Delicious.
Yes, so we did. Yeah, so that was a Thai green curry, just very gentle one for children, just sort of entry level green curry. But yeah, every single week there's a new recipe that we put together, and then there's also a blog. So the last week's one was on restless legs, and the next one's going to be on pneumonia. So we try and cover really important topics that lots of people will be affected by.
Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you from me as a mother and a grandmother now. And thank you from all our listeners. I know this is going to be invaluable for so many people. And congratulations for all the work you're doing. You really are an inspiration.
Caroline, thank you so much. It's been a lovely chat, and good luck with the podcast.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.